Hi everyone, my name's Katie Chowsell. I'm from Boomerang Labs. And if this is your first time coming to one of our webinars, welcome. If you're a regular that comes every month, thank you also for continuing to support this education series that we have ongoing alongside our startup and innovation programs that we run here. Today's focus is on the next generations coming through and how circular economy is an opportunity for us that's tricky to fully understand and fully appreciate when we're trying to undo all of our behaviors and all of our processes from linear thinking. So today we're talking about how Generation Alpha um, will be the leaders of the circular economy. I will soon be passing on to two of our speakers. We have Jacky Lo from The Joy of Giving, and we have Dorothy Sito from the Endless Play Studio. So before we do get into that, I do want to introduce us as Boomerang Labs. We are Australia's first circular economy accelerator, and we work with startups and innovators from the early stages where they're just working on an idea all the way through to late stage startups that are looking to scale and commercialize. We work with all sectors, all industries, and really looking at how we can implement circular economy into the core of businesses versus as a little add-on or a nice to have, seeing it as really integrated in how we approach business. So this is a bit of an overview. We love a good mountain image for how we show our programs and our support. Our events sit as a really key part of our work at Boomerang Labs in how we build our community and how we keep people engaged and interested in the innovation space, because we need the startups and we need the innovators to come up with the ideas, but we need the customers and we need the people there that will actually implement the change. Before we kick off, I do want to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the various lands on which we all work and live today. For me, that's the Wanneroo people in the Hunter region. I believe our speakers are in the Sydney area and the Central Coast as well, so they'll be able to speak to the lands that they're on. We do invite you to add an acknowledgement in the chat, recognising where you're zooming in from. Really great to see such a national audience on these calls. So that's it from me. No more slides to come through. Do want to acknowledge that, as I said, these are monthly webinars. We do have a new one just this morning went live, ready for March. We're talking about the silent sustainability movement and why some businesses are keeping quiet about why they're sustainable or how they're sustainable, I guess. So Taylor will be able to add that link to the chat at some point during this call. So we do have that up ready to go before even this webinar is, so that you're aware of what's coming up soon. But we will just get straight into the topic we have today, which again, looking at the next generations and how we can implement the circular economy. We have Jacky and we have Dorothy here, who will have 10-minute presentations chatting about their businesses, chatting about what they're doing in circular economy, and then we will have a panel discussion and invite you to ask questions as well. So without wasting more time, we will throw to both the speakers. And Jacky, you're first up, I believe, if you'd like to jump in and share screen.
Yep. Thank you, Caitlin. Can anyone see my screen?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, that's good. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Jacky Lo, founder of Joy of Giving. So thanks very much for Boomerang Lab having me as part of these discussions today. There's something about me that I want to actually share with everyone is I'm actually very passionate about data. And I actually help build a big data platform for policy making actually just before I will join, before we start the Joy of Giving. So that's the reason why I explained that to you is because I want to actually use some data to highlight why it's important to work with our next generations and what is the opportunity there that we shouldn't overlook. So something about toys. Did you know each year we spend about $1.75 billion on toys in Australia? So actually that is a pretty big market. So from a market size point of view, toy market is actually quite big, about 1/3 of, if you compare that with clothing, it's about 1/3 of the size. But we only spend, well, but we only do about 1% of, well, we only recycle about 1% of toys, which is like almost nothing. And we actually throw away about 87% of toys to landfill each year. So to put that into number, that's about 87,000 tons of toys, or 27 million toys we throw to landfill. And also because 90% of the toys are plastic. So toys actually contribute to 6% of landfill plastic globally. So that's actually a pretty scary number considering toys is only played by children, mostly, although we have a lot of adults who love toys. To put that into a bit more perspective, we have 5 million children in Australia. What that means is equivalent to each kid throwing away about 17 kilos of toys a year. And to compare that with the fashion industry, we actually throw away about 7.5 kilos of clothing every year. Both of them are pretty scary numbers, but it actually show you don't underestimate toys, like the impact of toys and children resources actually can be quite damaging to our environment. And what's also is the Gen Z is always been criticized for the love for fast fashion. And if we actually don't start looking into the next generations, the next generation like Gen Alpha could very much follow the Gen Z into that whole fast fashion problem that we're going to face in the future. So despite the trends, we think there is a hope. And what we've done is, as an adult, it's always very worrying to see the trends and actually say, okay, feels hopeless. But what we actually believe is we actually have a role to play here to actually give kids a hope and also a pathway they can participate in this whole circular economy, and also give them a pathway how they can help to build a more sustainable future. So this is how we were inspired to start Joy of Giving about 5 years ago. When we started Joy of Giving, the mission was about saving toys from landfill, bringing joy to children. And then we also see the opportunity of community educating children about sustainability practices and actually get them to change the mindset so that they can actually become the leader of circular economy. So since 2019, we have been running Toy Swap throughout Sydney and also Wollongong. So the event is held monthly in different parts of Sydney. And at each event, it's an opportunity where we can share our work with families. So in our Toy Swap, we always spend time with families. We look at the toys together, we check the toys, we weighted the toys, so the parents and the kids can see what they bring in and what can be reused, what they need to do to prepare for other children, so that they actually get to understand, okay, if they want to actually reuse resources, what is the pathway to do so? And the more important is when we see families coming back month after month, and sometimes you see the same toys coming back, that's when you know we've actually fulfilled the mission of reuse, and actually really let the family to feel they truly embrace, okay, what is a circular economy in their perspective. I guess from their point of view, is like, what is the one small step they can do, and that actually can help them to actually learn about how they can do and contribute to the bigger picture. So this year we continue running more Toy Swap with more different councils in different areas, and so this is actually a number of things that we continue to do and getting bigger. And this year we also launched the Joy of Giving Hub in Crow's Nest. So what we actually found is, beside the events, we could do more. So when we found a space for ourselves, we decided to open it as a sustainability hub. So where we can get children, families to come, they can connect, they can do Toy Swap at all time. And also we will be running more workshops to actually share with them about the circularity and sustainability practices. And but in 2023, what we actually saw the opportunity was in addition to the events, we could actually engage with children using toys. So toys actually becomes a good medium to have the conversations with children, work with children on how to reuse, how to extend life of toys and everyday life items. So that to create a sustainability mindset and actually get them to participate as well. So in the workshop, something we actually found is, and this is one thing I want to highlight here, is when you work with children, a lot of the languages we use is difficult to understand. So for example, when we say we throw away 27 million toys to landfill, children have no idea what 27 million means. So we actually have to break it down into a different language. So for example, we tell them, okay, that's enough toy to cover 60 football fields. And then when we actually talk to even younger children, then they oh, what the 60 football field means. 60 football fields still a number they can't comprehend. So we actually break it down to say, if we throw away 50 toys every minute, that is 27 million toys. And then all of a sudden they were saying, oh, 50 toys every minute we throw away, then that actually is easier to understand.
All right, you guys say thing and
sorry. Yep. So I think this is actually where during the workshop, we learn a lot from the children as well. It's not just they learn from us, so we learn from them. And we use this learning to actually refine how we can work with children and actually make it more effective for them. And our work doesn't just stop there. So one of the extra benefit for the work that we do is we also help children for those in need. So by sharing toys with them, we actually can have a bigger impact and also share the message to wider audience. And also an extra reward for the people who participate in the activities is they can also see, okay, some of the toys could be shared with more children and bring joy to them. And this is actually like an additional benefit to sometimes in the circular economy is also about social impact. So this is actually a greater social impact that we can create. So yes, so at Joy of Giving, we believe that small actions like swapping a toy can create lasting impact. So this is actually where we want the family to do a small things. It could be as simple as cleaning a toy, taping boxes, making sure the toys that they ready to pass on is actually done properly and no pieces is lost. So because when you ask the kids like what happened if you lose a piece in the chest, then they will say, well, you feel sad. So that's actually the language you want to talk to them and they get the ideas of, okay, when they pass on other items, what they can do. So yes, so we really value the opportunity to work with the Gen Alpha and hope we are there to create a pathway and give them hope to succeed and make the circular economy, circularity becomes like a norm. So that will become that will let them to create a more sustainable future. Thank you. That's from me.
Great. Thanks so much, Jacky. That was such a useful overview of what you're working on. Before we throw to Dorothy, I do want to ask a question we have in the chat here from Peter, and this is around, I guess, why toys are actually getting thrown out. Are you finding, and you may not have all the data at your fingertips right now, but only toys that are broken, are they the main problem with toys getting thrown to landfill, or is the issue of people prematurely throwing toys out that there's actually nothing wrong with them?
No, there are. Yeah, there's I can answer that later. There's actually some report. They actually look at how toys, I guess the journey of toys, where they ended up in each step. Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. And Jo has asked too, Jo said that it looks like you've done a lot of work with Scouts. Can you talk more about how this worked in that partnership?
Yes, with Scouts. So yeah, it's not just about Scouts. We definitely have done work with Scouts. I think Scouts were like a great group to work with, but we also have done workshop with school, and this year we actually are running more workshop with local schools. We have a grant to actually run school workshop with InnoWest. And the experience we have is you in a school environment, you probably would have the opportunity to deliver materials and get them to do the swapping. But in a Scout environment, that's where you can actually get kids to do a bit more preparations, and they can actually learn a lot more. Yes. To answer, actually, I should answer the question, like your last question as well. Is like toys are not, they're not necessarily broken when we throw away. It's a lot of the time it's like once they got piled up. A lot of the time, in fact, Sustainability Australia, Victoria, not Australia, Sustainability Victoria and Australian Toy Association did a research on the journey of toys, like where they ended up. It could be in people's like storage, it could be in like they could be passed on to other friends. But because we don't have a recycle facility, toys will end up in landfill regardless. And so that's why 87% of toys go to landfill each year. And the rest of the 12%, which is not recycled, actually could be in someone's garage, could be done, they actually use the word downcycling, which means they could become some other material. But there isn't like a real recycling facility in Australia. So hence like the landfill rate is so high.
Yeah, that's scary stats, but really puts it into perspective. I guess we think of them as such small things, and kids are only little people, but they create a lot of waste, at least not at their own fault, but just how society consumes at this stage. So thank you, Jacky. That was really helpful. We will grab you back for the panel discussion afterwards, but we'll throw to Dorothy now to hear more about Endless Play Studio. So just bear with us, Taylor. We'll swap around our faces. Here she is.
Let me share my screen and you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Can you see the full screen? I can't.
No, I can see you clicked it, but it didn't respond to you.
Of course it didn't.
Just
Okay, here we are. I couldn't see that part of it. Well, I'm glad Jacky took care of all the stats because there won't be any stats in my presentation. So Dorothy Sito, founder and director of Endless Play Studio. What we do is work with early childhood educators to empower them with the tool, resources, and community to bring circularity and regeneration to life in their classroom. So before I tell you a bit more about Endless Play Studio, I'll tell you a little bit more about me. So I started working on Endless Play Studio 3 years ago. Before that, I had a 14-year career in the corporate world at the intersection of business, technology, and innovation. I was last director of strategic innovation and design at Salesforce, which is a big technology company, where I led big strategic innovation projects for customers. And I've long been passionate about sustainability and regeneration. In fact, I grew up on a regenerated property. So when my parents bought this land, which was a decommissioned garbage tip, and that was almost 40 years ago, and they cleaned it up and they added soil and they planted lots of trees and shrubs. And so I grew up with those trees. I was 2 years old. So I have a very strong connection to the land and to that country in particular. And in case you're wondering where that was, and you're hearing my accent, I was in France on the German border. And yeah, and it's never left me. And so I guess my career pivoted when I had children. So my youngest is 4.5 now. And at that time, when I was on maternity leave, I also took a course on the circular economy. And that was at Berkeley Extension. It was a 10-week course. And it really changed my life. And there's 2 things I really took away with me, and that kind of end up to, leading me to founding Endless Play Studio. The first thing was that 90% of all things have to be redesigned to transition to a circular economy. And I was like, oh, well, as an innovation professional, a designer, I guess I have something to add to this transition. And the other thing, which really I could not shake, was the fact that to transition to a sustainable world, we really need to change the way we think. We really need to adopt circular and regenerative ways of thinking. And yeah, I couldn't shake it. And so, you know, I really kind of sat with this problem statement of how might we nurture a new generation of hopeful, regenerative thinkers, doers, and innovators. And I did a couple of years of research across multiple disciplines, starting with education, because very early on, I had this, you know, hunch that obviously behavior change is hard as adults, no matter how passionate we are about transitioning to a sustainable world. This behavior change is hard. So let's start with young children in preschool. So I did a lot of research around education, circular economy, regeneration and regenerative leadership, system thinking, indigenous perspective, behavior change, amongst other things. And that's how I came up to working with early childhood educators, because I really think there's a great opportunity working with childcare centers and to kind of bring them the tools, knowledge, and community to bring education for sustainability to life. So obviously great opportunity to start very young, also great opportunity because the early years learning framework, which is the curriculum for the early years, changed at the beginning of last year. And it now has sustainability as one of 7 principles. So the government basically saying sustainability is really important in early childhood. And the document talks about the 3 dimensions of sustainability being economic, environmental, and social. And it also mentions the 7 R's of sustainability, what we would call the 7 R's or 10 R's of the circular economy. So great opportunity to kind of really bring that into the classroom. And what we do is really take a holistic approach to education for sustainability. So this is not about sustainability as a subject or as a silo, it's education for sustainability. And so I mentioned, you know, we did quite a bit of research, and out of this research really came out that we need to do 3 things. And when I say we, I mean as parents, as leaders, as, you know, educators, we need to do 3 things for our children starting very young. The first thing we need to do is help them imagine a circular and regenerative world. So we need to give them as many examples as circularity and regeneration. Example from the natural world, example from indigenous cultures, but also the latest and greatest circular and regenerative innovations, because we want them to develop new frames of reference. So give them as many examples as possible. The second thing we need to do is that we need to help them develop the competencies to bring that circular world to life. And yes, that includes, you know, teaching them about principles of circularity and regeneration. But there's much more than that. It's about teaching them or kind of nurturing, I guess, their empathy and compassion and courage and presence and critical thinking and ability to unpack complexity and navigate complexity and their communication. And if you're familiar with the inner development goals, these are all inner development capabilities, and they're really, really fundamental to transition to a circular, sustainable world. And the last thing we need to help them do is take action to grow their confidence. So growing their confidence and agency. We want our children to grow up thinking that they can make a difference, no matter what their strengths and interests are. So what does that look like in the early year classroom, you might ask? And you know, I've got many examples. I don't have time to touch on too many of them just now, but I can give more later. Basically, we really want to help our children see the interconnectedness of everything and the circular nature of everything, right? So here I've got a photo of the compost, and quite a few childcare centers across Australia already do gardening and they already do composting. But we want to make sure that we really show the full cycle from, you know, the food that grows in the garden to our plates, to our stomachs, to, you know, the waste being added to the compost, to the compost, making it back into the garden. We want to show and be very explicit about that full cycle. And we want to help our children start picturing everywhere where there's circularity, and there's circularity, you know, everywhere. But we want to help them start noticing when that is the case. So another example is that I had an early childhood educator who was working with 2 to 3 years old. So we're talking really little children, right? And these children were into farm animals, as they often are at that age. And so the educator, instead of just doing, okay, farm animals, you know, what are their name? What sound do they make? She started talking about, you know, the sheep and its wool, and showing them a video how, you know, the lamb was being shaven and how the wool was then being used to make a jumper, and how this jumper, once, you know, if it couldn't be repaired, if it was really, really damaged, could be added to the compost. And they had just set up a compost bin in that room, right? So even with these little kids, showing them the full cycle, and the kids were absolutely fascinated, right? Because these little children, what they want more than anything else is to make sense of the world around them, and it's to make sense, you know, of their world and the world more broadly. And so even, you know, we introduce the tools of system thinking to these little children because it helps them make sense of the world. And so they really actually lap it up. So how do we do this? Basically, we offer professional development and advisory services to childcare centers. We've got a masterclass, which really kind of goes back to basic in terms of what even is sustainability, because we always in early childhood default to just the environmental dimension of sustainability. So we need them to understand that it's a lot more than that. We talk about regeneration, we talk about circularity, we talk about how everyone has something to bring to education for sustainability, no matter their strengths or interest. And then we've got leadership workshops where we work with early childhood leaders and educators on their education for sustainability strategy and build their sustainability action plans. And then we've got a flagship program, which is a 9 to 12 months program called Empower, where we really work with the whole center to transition to a culture of education for sustainability. So it's not second thought. It's not something we do every so often. You know, this is what we do in terms of helping children imagine, develop, and do. So that's what we do. Here's this QR code will take us to our website if you want to learn more. If you want to follow our journey, I encourage you to subscribe to the news at the bottom of the website, and you can follow us on social as well. And I very much look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Dorothy. That's great. Feel free to keep that up for a few seconds so that people can get that. We'll also share contact details for all of our presenters in our follow-up email. You'll also receive access to the recording from the session in case you'd like to catch up on anything. Great. So we'll also grab Jacky back in the spotlight, the virtual spotlight, and go through some questions. Few we have prepared earlier, but please, we do invite you to send some questions into the chat, it would be really great to get your questions from the audience. If you'd like to ask your question live, there's also a little hands up button. Some of your laptops might even be smart enough to register that by actually putting your hand up. Mine's not, as we can see, it's not doing that. But for some people, you might find that option. So, Jacky, I'll go to you first for this first question, just because you've had a bit of a break now. And really broadly, just want to start with the question of the topic of the session. Asking you, in your opinion, how do you see that Generation Alpha is positioned to be among the next leaders of the circular economy? And when I say Generation Alpha, we're also talking to Beta, which I believe is starting this year, and even the generation before that, because in their own ways, they're learning the circular economy and at different ages and at different experiences too.
Yeah, so thanks very much for the question. So I actually have a Gen Alpha at home. So my daughter is 11. So I also asked her the same question. So one thing we learn from when we work with children at the events and workshop, one thing we notice is the new generation, they very much aware of what circularity means. They actually understand, well, to them, a lot of the time, they will understand very well about recycling. So recycling is something that I think we've been spending about 30 years in Australia, educating the wider community. So the new generation actually understand recycling really well. And the interesting thing is when you actually talk to them about that whole 7L, okay, let's just start moving up the chain. That's when they start getting lost a little bit, because when they actually, when you talk to them about reduce, reuse, recycle, because the language and because of the material that we use in public space are generally for adults. So for example, we talk about a lot about fractions, we talk about a lot about even coffee cups. The kids' feedback is, I don't drink coffee, so why would I? So what does that have anything to do with me? So I think what we actually find is, so we actually talk to them more about something closer to them. It's more about, let's say, the jar at home, like you have a few glass jar, what do you do? And then that's when you actually start getting them to think about, okay, you can reuse the jar, you can reduce usage. Maybe when you buy things from supermarket, you can start thinking about the packaging, different things that they can start thinking. So, but what's interesting is when you actually talk to them, they act really quickly because they have unlimited imaginations. Like when you talk to them and say, can you imagine what is out there? That's when they actually start telling you, okay, well, we could do this is what we found. And composting, like which Dorothy used in the presentation, is another example that they actually understand very well. When you talk to them, they will start saying, oh, there are little worms in a worm farm, there's like composting. So I think the opportunity is definitely there. But one thing I would actually recommend us to do is we have to actually start thinking about them. When we start thinking about the children, can we actually start tailor materials for the younger generation to go moving from recycling to upper the chain into the full circular economy space as well?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jacky. And great to see you have a case study at home. That could give you some unique insights too with your daughter.
Yes.
Dorothy, just see if you have anything else to add to that answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got two case studies at home too, which is perfect. But what I want to say, to answer that question is that firstly, it's not going to be that long before that generation hits the workforce. I know it sounds long right now, but in the context of the transition to a circular economy, it's not that long. Like we really need to do something right now for these little people. The other thing also I've really found in my research is that we always, kind of assume that parents influence the children, but the amount in which children, even that young, start in preschool, influence their parents is extraordinary. And so, they come back from daycare having done composting or having done gardening, recycling, whatever it is, right? And they teach their parents what goes in the recycling bin. So we really need to, also think about the systems change from that end and not just always the adults teaching the children. And we see that, for example, with Indigenous perspectives as well, where, certainly in early childhood, the focus on Indigenous perspectives started probably 10 years ago, at least, and what children come home now with in terms of Indigenous perspective and understanding that is mind-blowing. So I think there's a lot of hope, and we just really need to do it now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And so often kids are reduced to being naive versus maybe they're onto something. Maybe we're missing something now. I will throw to Catherine and bring you into the Taylor will bring you into the spotlight so you can ask your question live. I understand Little Renters is very much in this space, so also keen to hear any thoughts you have beyond your question.
Yeah, so first of all, Jacky and Dorothy, thank you so much for sharing the data and your insights. It's really great to hear. Yeah, I'm Catherine and I'm the founder of Little Renters. It's a children's clothing rental business, so I'm very much in the same industry and passionate about our little generation. My question to both of you, as in like Little Renters operates in the fashion space and clothing, and there's a little bit of movement from government and the industry, for example, Seamless to support that movement of circular economy. I'm wondering, within the toys industry and education, do you see that, for example, that the toy manufacturers and government for education are coming to the table or are being held responsible, accountable to actually contribute to this movement? Or do you talk to them? How's your engagement with those, the industry and government?
Yeah, I can start by answering this question. I mean, in early childhood education, I think we're very lucky that sustainability is now, one of 7 principles in the early years learning framework, but it has required years and years of lobbying from, educators, academics in the field to make sure we got there. That's a reality. And what we're seeing now, they've put it in the early years learning framework, but the government hasn't offered funding support yet for educators to get that training, for example. So I think there's always a lag, and maybe as they start noticing that centers, childcare centers are struggling to implement sustainability or education for sustainability, then with a year or 2 delays, they might start offering funding. Unfortunately, I think that's what we're faced with.
Yes, thank you. So from my perspective, I actually have been in discussions with toy manufacturer and ATA, Australian Toy Association. So what we actually found is, although they acknowledge it's an issue, there isn't actually a real action they have put in place. And one little fact that we also want to bring up is the toys that we actually talk about, like when I said 87,000 tons of toys we throw away to landfill, they haven't even included the packaging in there. So unfortunately, we actually did some research on our own. We actually tried to weight the packaging and the toys and see what is the ratio between the packaging and toys. The ratio for toy packaging is actually pretty big. So it can be anything about 20 to 30%. The problem with that is even though you might play with the toy for a month or 2, the packaging is the first thing you throw away, and very unlikely it can be recycled. So I think there are a number of things that government need to do. I think government need to really push the manufacturer to start doing sustainable manufacturing. The number of practices they can do, the easy win there, the easy win is probably start with the packaging. There are a number of things the government can do. And also in our research, we also found Australia is quite behind when it comes to doing research in some of the circularity. So for example, when we look at anything about toys, the data we got, a lot of them is from France, a lot of them from UK. Australia, the only one I found, I have to give credit to Victoria government. If anyone is from Victorian government, actually most of the research data came from Victoria. So Victoria actually, in fact, back in 2021, I think they actually have a roadmap for toys about how they can create a sustainability roadmap for toys. I haven't actually been able to find any other research and information from other state government. I did email EPA New South Wales. EPA New South Wales reply is they don't have any action plan right now. So I think it's very hard when we talk to and lobby with the toy manufacturer to do any responsible things, because a lot of them are actually overseas toy manufacturer. So I think this is probably something the government needs to do a little bit more to encourage like toy retailers and recyclers to start doing yeah, give them a bit of a target to see how they can actually have their own roadmap and pathway to help the environment.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. That's really insightful. And I did just have a very quick Google and I found that report and I put that in the chat in case anyone would like to have a bit of a read. We'll go next to Amy. Thank you for waiting patiently. You've had your hand up for a little while. Do you want to ask your question?
Thanks very much, Caitlin. On my question, great. Thanks for all of your work, guys, and everybody in the room as well. Dorothy, just you obviously have done lots of research into all aspects of. Yeah, I've got a child. I've got a 2.5-year-old in childcare, and I've been thinking about how can I get the childcare to connect with Diaper Recycle so that they can give their diapers there and connect the dots, and there's so many influences there, and through my own kind of engagement with my child, who when I have a pile of stuff lying in the kitchen goes, "Mama, get it? Side of the road? Side of the road, Mama, get it?" I acquire most of my things from the side of the road, right? So I'm really aware of the influence of what it is that I do in my day-to-day life on my child's values, right? And I actually think that lots of parents don't really think about that a lot. Like, they don't actually look at the things that they're doing every morning, every afternoon, every day, and what that sets up as a norm for their child. Because our children, unfortunately, when we were living in villages, they saw the way everybody else did things, right? So the kids who don't have very sustainable parents, or just busy parents who need lots of convenience in their lives, I mean, I am burdened massively by using, disposable nappies, right? I find it really hard that I have to use them, and I don't have to use them, but then what are my other options? Do I stay at home? No, my mum stayed at home, but everything's changed, right? So everything affects everything else. And like, I'm wondering about how you saw the opportunity that kids then change their parents often. That's influenced their parents, which is great. And I wonder if that's a part of your strategy, or if that's a conversation that you have with these childcare centres. Is that, because I don't think that they think about it either. They're focused on the children. They're not actually focused on the parents and what they can do to empower parents to solve problems with each other, for each other, and create that loops, because kids see other parents and people, what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I just think that there's a really big gap in the actually building that whole system approach, like actually everybody's vision, the educators, the kids, the teachers, the parents working together to, normalize that. And are you also facilitating policy change, like in terms of they only acquire their toys from circular locations, or from, like all that stuff? Sorry, big question.
No, absolutely. And firstly, I mean, childcare centers really want to work with families. It's also part of the early years learning framework that they have to. And I think I'm very lucky in terms of working with early childhood educators, because they really consider the child as a whole. They never think of the child and not think about the child's family. I think that just doesn't happen. That's the way they train. I have a lot of childcare centers that tells me one of the hardest part of their job is engaging families. They really struggle to get engagement from families, because families are busy. They're like, well, there's a reason I bring my children to daycare, so they could be looked after, and I don't need to do that part. And of course, some centers are better than others, and some parents are better than others. But it's a constant thing. They ask me, so how do we engage the parents? How do we engage the parents, right? And I'm like, well, it's part of the journey, but you first have to do, in my view, they first need to do a lot of work in the center before they start engaging the parents. And they start engaging the parents by sharing, firstly, what they've been doing, right? There's always, like daily news or the center newsletter. So sharing that, inviting the parents when they can too, right? And it's about kind of changing the way we think about, again, education for sustainability. It's not just bringing the parents in if there's a gardening event. It's bringing the parents in to talk about how their grandparents used to do things, right? Like, that's education for sustainability. It's just kind of, as soon as we start broadening that view, all these opportunities come to the surface. But we need to start by broadening this view of what education for sustainability is. Otherwise, blinkers on, all we can see is gardening and composting and recycling. And,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people are not interested in those things, and that's fair enough. So yeah, so that's one thing. And sorry, your second bit of the question was around...
Oh, it was just, yeah, engaging parents and also policies. I think, you know, like,
Oh.
do you talk through, you know, their sustainability? I imagine that they are addressing that at some level, but
yes, we're trying to link it all together, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not really focused on the operational side of things, but I will always get them to think about everything as holistically as possible. When can we integrate things as opposed to segregate everything, right? These are some of the things we talk about. And so, yes, that comes with that.
That's great. Yeah, you know, I think in my observations, I've just seen that the gaps is the lack of our awareness of the interconnectedness of everything. That is probably the fundamental problem for all of us, and waste and all of the things, psychology, loneliness, all of the problems.
Absolutely.
And they're all feeding into each other, but we separate them out so we don't think that one affects the other. So that's the bit that I'm trying to figure out. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thank
Thanks.
you for your question.
I just want to quickly add one point. So
Sure.
when we were running workshop with children at primary school and also with the Scout, one thing we found is when we ran the toys, when we actually asked them to bring in a toy so they could actually learn about toys and swap with children, we actually got the parents involved indirectly. Because when we say, okay, go home and actually talk to your parents, like prepare a couple of toys and bring it back to school, all of a sudden the parents actually get involved. Oh, I have to find 2 toys for my children. And then they have to hold a difficult conversation with children. Which 2 toys you can give it away to the next kids? And indirectly, there are many ways that we could get the parents involved. I totally agree with Dorothy. It's very difficult because I like the teacher will actually tell us the same thing as well. But that's actually when you get, but that's back to Dorothy's presentation as well. You could use children as a channel back to the parents. If you actually say, okay, do certain actions, do certain items, that sometimes is a great way to open the dialogue.
Right. Thanks, Jackie. That's a really
if I
great
can
example.
just add something, Caitlin, like
Yeah,
just
of
also
course.
thinking back, some of these things takes time, right? We work with the children, and some days they'll be playing at home and they're gonna be like, look, mommy, daddy, I've built this building, and you know, it's amazing because like humans can live next to wild animals, and you know, this is why it works. And by the way, on the outside of my building is green moss concrete. You know, and it's better for the environment and this and that, right? And it could be 6 months, a year until they start having this conversation, but it will happen.
Such smart kids these days. That's very impressive. No, thank you. That's really great to share that example too. We've got a few questions coming through the chat, so I'm just backtracking so I don't miss any. We had one here from Stephen, which Jackie, I think you probably well positioned to answer this. His question was that how can we have broken toys that are made of, say, hard plastic? How can we make sure these are broken down in Australia to be used again in new products? So we're shifting a little bit more to the manufacturing and recycling conversation now.
Yes, I'm no expert with materials, but we actually have spoken with people about the plastic toys. One feedback we actually got is plastic toys are generally not made of a single type of plastic. They're composite plastic, let alone the complications of you have to break the toys apart, take all the electronic out before you have like a plastic. The problem with plastic toys is for many reasons, they probably put UV protections in toys. They probably put other material to make toys to be maybe flexible, to be squishy sometimes, and they actually become very hard to be recycled. So some of the toy manufacturers are fully aware of this. So there are actually toy manufacturers, they make single material plastic toys. So I think about less than 10% of the toys, when you actually go to the back of the box, you will actually find they said they have a single type of plastic used, and they even give you the plastic type in there. So then you would actually potentially have a way to recycle toys, but majority of the plastic toys unfortunately cannot be recycled easily. And that's why the cost of recycling is so high and we don't have a way to recycle them globally. It's not just about Australia, but I think in Australia in particular, there's just not a scheme. Today, I think the only one we know is the TerraCycles by partnership with Big W. Even then, I believe the amount of toys that they can recycle is very, very limited.
Thank you, Jackie. And yeah, there's a bit more discussion in the chat around making things more recyclable, and the packaging side, as we've talked about, is really challenging. And often, you know, toys that, as we're seeing, aren't considered very much at all, but even less so is the packaging side as well. Next question we had was from Gwen, so I'll do a little bit of reading because I believe it's been answered in the chat, but of course Dorothy and Jackie jump in if anything else comes to mind. But Gwen said that sustainability is a cross-curriculum priority in the Australian K-12 V9 curriculum. Again, there's no financial support. Many teachers are untrained or unsure of how to teach due to media disagreement. The question was, do you know of any teacher PD to help them adapt their current units and lessons to teach circularity? Tammy has come back and said that the Sustainability Victoria's resource Smart Schools program offers teachers PDs to assist this. So thanks, Tammy. And also Debbie is here from Sustainability Victoria as well. Thanks, Debbie. Saying they're doing quite a bit of work in this space, predominantly focused on primary and secondary schools and students. So that's really great to see. A lot of focus on the education piece from early childhood, looking at endless play through to school-aged children as well. Dorothy, do you have anything to add to that, or I guess that's
No, I mean, you know, there are resources here and there, but it's very hard for, I think, teachers like at any age to just go and find the resources and know how to apply it unless there's really, you know, proper professional development. And again, I think until we broaden everyone's understanding of sustainability, that it's not just the environmental dimension, we will get stuck in the same place. You know, and I think there's so much more we can do, but yes.
Absolutely. Debbie, I see you've got your hand up. Good timing. Did you want to jump in at all? And Taylor can add you to the spotlight.
Thank you. I've enjoyed listening to the presentations. Thank you. I was chatting to someone else from WA. We're a bit of in a bubble here in Victoria, and we think other states are following suit. And having chatted to these people from WA, I realised we are quite ahead. And perhaps compared to New South Wales as well. All our resources are available on the website, so feel free to look at those. Tammy and I both work as part of the Resource Smart Schools program, and we're happy to answer questions. And I'd agree with everything your presenters have said. We've been working with schools, or the program has been running for 15 years, and we find that often the kids go and educate the parents. And so you're hitting that demographic that somehow has been missed. And it's often led by a couple of really passionate teachers. And if they then get the buy-in from other teachers or parents, it grows and builds momentum. And it then becomes the new norm, which then encourages others to join in. But it's not necessarily a fast process. But yeah, happy to chat and help if anyone's interested. Thanks, Katie, for putting on this event.
No worries. Thank you, Debbie. And thank you to our presenters. I realise that we're at time all but at this stage. I do want to note that Leah has put in a commentary here around her experience at Reverse Garbage, a hero in this space, particularly in terms of community engagement. And perhaps the last question is here from Patrick Mooney. Sorry to anyone I'm missing. The chat's going crazy now. And I can't keep. But Patrick has asked, read the lack of focus from manufacturers or regulators on circularity. This year, boards in the top 200 are now required to include climate risk and impact in their operations, reporting and governance. It's not a big stretch for that to be extended to circularity in general. What is your experience of industry bodies taking up this issue? Who do you think might be the best channel? Jacky, do you want to jump in there? I look like you were ready to.
I don't have a good answer for this one, unfortunately. I think it's mostly the EPA in each state that we speak. But even then, I think I think one thing I realized when you talk to EPAs, they focus a lot more on large scales of circularity projects. So if it's actually anything to do with bigger recycle scheme, solar panels, they probably have quite a big interest in those areas. But when you talk to them about a grassroots education, in fact, Dorothy, you probably would notice is they probably spend they probably don't spend as much effort and focus on the grassroots and education approach. So I think this is probably something we could lobby to the local state EPAs and see how we can actually have the funding make available for the training, the funding make available for grassroots projects.
Great, thanks, Jacky. Well, thank you everyone again for joining this call. I think it's been really useful and great engagement for everyone. So thank you for all your questions. With 2 minutes to go, I will just do a final question to the two panelists. If you had one takeaway or two takeaways, we won't restrict you from this webinar, what would you like people to remember or to action once they step away from this Zoom? Dorothy, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, for me, it's really with young children is the importance of hope and solutions. We've spent way too much time over the last 15 years educating children about the problems without properly educating them about the solution or potential solutions. And so they need hope. We don't want them to fall into any kind of anxiety because that paralyzes. We need optimism, hope, and a lot of inspiration.
Right, thanks, Dorothy. Jacky?
Yes, very much on the hope and pathway to the better future. And the other one thing to add is a small step. Every single small steps count, so we don't have to do something huge and big. So we just have to actually encourage our next generation to do one small step at a time, and that can lead to a better future.
Perfect. I think there's a quote in that somewhere. I'm going to butcher it, but we don't need a few people doing sustainability perfectly. We need a lot of people doing it imperfectly. Sorry to whoever I'm definitely ruining that quote from, but you get the gist from it. So thank you everyone for joining. Again, Taylor will be sending through a follow-up email in the next couple of days, including a recording link, a few of the links we've chatted about, and contact details for Dorothy and Jacky for you to get involved with these great organisations. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.